Hey, it's Chris Ballew from the Presidents of the United States of America, professional rock band from Seattle, Washington, and you are listening to my leaky mixtape? No, my weekly mixtape with Brian Coburn. I mean, come on, you know where you are.
Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, a podcast that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Tonight, I'm excited to welcome Chris Ballew of the Presidents of the United States of America onto the show to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the band's classic debut album. Chris, welcome to the program, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be asked to be anywhere these days.
Well, I'm excited to have you, but I like to always start by asking all of my first-time guests, what does the word mixtape mean to you?
Oh, wow. I mean, it means putting a pencil in a cassette to rewind it. It means the clickety-clack of cassettes going into recorders. It means when I first got my first double cassette stereo component, I felt like I was, had more power than the most major of major labels to make the greatest sequence of songs. I loved making mixtapes. I had good friends who were very good at making mixtapes. There's this guy named Billy Wayne, who was very eccentric show booker and music fan in Boston. And his mixtapes were like scientifically engineered to just make your brain happy. So yeah, all that comes to mind when you say mixtape.
Fantastic. Well, before we dive into the President's self-titled album, I'd like to take us back even further than that, if you don't mind, as your career in music included a stint with Beck before the Presidents took off. Could you talk about how that connection came together and what the moment was that drove you to leave Beck's camp for the Presidents full time?
Yeah, the Presidents had already played some shows. We really formed as a three-piece in December of 93. That's when we first played with Jason. So sometime early in 94, like in January 94, I got a call from an old friend from Boston from the busking day. We used to busk together. This girl named Mary Lou Lord called me up, and she said, I share a publisher with this new artist named Beck, and he needs to put a band together to go on tour. He's just a solo guy, but he made a record and he needs a band. And she's like, I thought of you and put your name in the hat. So, let's make this happen. And I kind of ignored it because imagine if your phone rang and somebody said, oh, I want you to be in the band for this, Daniel and the Blueberries. They're going to be amazing. And you're like, I don't know who Daniel and the Blueberries is. So it's kind of like that. And I also, in one hand, I had the Beck thing. And in the other hand, I had the option to become the bass player in a band called Flop that I loved in Seattle. But either way, the Presidents had already started rolling. But eventually, I met Beck. Mary Lou accompanied him on a West Coast residency tour, and he came to Seattle, and I met him and saw him do two shows, just him and an acoustic guitar. Blew my mind, and I went down to Olympia to audition, I guess. I mean, I didn't know how to play slide guitar. And that's what he needed, was a slide guitar player to do the thing live. And so I said I could play slide guitar, but I really did not know how to play slide guitar. So I went to a music store before I got on the bus and bought this guitar.
Wow.
And took it down to Olympia and walked into Calvin Johnson's house and walked down into the basement and into the little recording room, and they said, play slide on this song. And I'd never heard the song before, and I was kind of hunting and pecking, and I guess I was good enough or hunty and pecky enough that he liked what I was doing, because a couple days later he called me up and said, hey, do you want to go on tour? And it was one of those moments like my life is beginning, like big graduation, the feeling of graduating to another level. So I did go out on tour with him. I went to LA. I was the only band member that didn't live in LA, so he very graciously let me live with him in his house. We drove around we kind of did stuff as a duo for a little while. Like we did KCRW Morning Becomes Eclectic as a duo, and we did, some little recording projects together on his 4-track. And, once we got on the road, it kind of became obvious. Well, it was apparent during rehearsals and also manifested on the road. You know, he didn't know how to be in charge of a band. And I think he signed with Geffen partly because Sonic Youth was on Geffen, and he was a huge Sonic Youth fan. So and he kind of wasn't a big fan of the Loser song. He wasn't as proud of that achievement as you might hope. So he kind of wanted to dismantle the happy-go-lucky slacker image that the press was trying to make. So his live show was kind of messy and noisy and kind of just anti. And I was, of course, used to putting on like a show. Hey, everybody, come on, and let's get together and have a bunch of good old fun. So my style and his style started to kind of create some friction. Meanwhile, this demo tape that we'd made as the Presidents was selling like hotcakes over the bar at the Comet, where Jason worked in Seattle as a bartender. So during the second Beck tour, I got a call from Jason, or I called him from the road, and he said, you got to come home. This is, this has momentum, even though we're not doing any shows. So let's do shows and get back on it. So yeah, the combination of like the aesthetics not matching with me and Beck as far as our performance style, and then the Presidents kind of, bubbling up, had me in a place where I was like, well, I got to go back. And when I told Beck that, he was like, everybody said you would quit. Because I guess to everybody else, it was pretty clear that I had my own thing. But the beautiful thing about the whole experience was, driving around LA with Beck, talking about his transition from bedroom 4-tracker to major label signee, and all the pressure that comes with that and the opportunities that come with that was really, and then kind of being on tour and watching him receive all this attention. And it's like he had a fame tornado and I got to stand next to his fame tornado. And then I got my own fame tornado later. So it was like I went to fame school with Beck, and another graduation, I guess. Yeah, I got accepted into fame school and then I graduated and did my own thing.
Well, I have to ask, when you were playing with Beck, because I unfortunately didn't catch any of the shows, were you using the basitar or guitbass with him, or were you playing a full 6-string?
No, I was playing 6-string, and occasionally I would double up the bass player. I'd also play bass, and I also ran the sampler with all the little like samples and bits and bobs that needed triggering. But yeah, it was a 6-string situation. This 2-string behind me is the one that I bought in Boston in '93, and that's the one that's on the debut record. I got it for $75, and I sold 5 million records with it. So,
wow. Now I have to ask, what made you guys decide to do that 2-string approach?
Wasn't a decision as much as a discovery. I was in Boston for quite a few years after college in New York, and from like 88 to 92, 3, something like that. And I had been playing an acoustic, little like 3/4 scale acoustic guitar as my main thing, with a contact mic taped to it. And I started breaking strings, and I didn't have money to buy new strings. So I got down to 4 strings, and I wrote a whole bunch of songs in a 4-string tuning. And then I met Mark Sandman of the band Morphine, and I don't remember how I met him, but we ended up becoming friends. And he had this red guitar in his studio set up as a 2-string, and I picked it up and just went clang, clang, blang, and I went, whoa, this is where I belong. This is it. This is what I've been on my way to, with the 6 and down to 4 and now down to 2. And it just felt like home. Just felt like every influence I wanted to honor by writing my own version of a song. Like Lump for me was always a Buzzcocks song. Mach 5 was a Kiss song. Dune Buggy was a Steve Miller ripoff. It's like, but I could wear my influences on my sleeve, and filtered through the 2-string, they felt new and fresh. So, and it was just like fit my minimalist attitude, which is like fewer strings to buy, fewer strings to tune. It's just kind of felt right. So that's kind of where we did it. And then I created a 3-string version, figuring if you got the 2 and the 3 together, well, that's 5 strings. You could really sound like one amazing Keith Richards style, open G tuning human with 5 strings with 2 instruments. So, and John Spencer Blues Explosion was a big inspiration for that too, because they had 2 guitars and drums, and they did just fine.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah. Now, musically, thematically, the Presidents was a bit of a different animal versus what was happening in music in the early to mid 90s. The sound was a little tongue-in-cheek, a little self-deprecating, almost the yang to the yin of what alternative rock was at the time. How
Yeah.
did you guys hone that sound that pretty much I always deemed as the alternative to the alternative?
Yeah, we were the alternative to the alternative. That's I never thought of that actually. Well, I have a distinct, so my whole life I wrote songs that were fun and bouncy, and even when the themes weren't yet animals and food, even when I was writing about ideas and girls, there was energy, and like entertainment was the order of the day with my songwriting. So it was less like looking at my shoes and more like, come on, serving the crowd. I always thought about the crowd as I wrote, like, well, what's in this song for them to latch onto and enjoy. And so anyway, it was just a thing that was always ingrained in me, having grown up listening to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band exclusively from when I was 4 to 10. I was like, music can be entertaining and transformative and multifaceted and tell all kinds of stories. So anyway, foundation of that. But then when the grunge thing exploded, I loved it. And first of all, musically, I mean, I had been in Boston trying to record songs that sounded like Nirvana and failing because I just didn't have the angst necessary. But then when I heard Nevermind, I was like, oh, this is great. I'll just listen to this record instead of trying to make my own. This is way better and easier. So I had great admiration, especially for that record. I mean, that record just had the amazing combination of grit and shine that tickled my brain to no end. But I do remember the 1992 Video Music Awards. I was living with my parents because I had no money, and I was watching the show, and all the grungies were getting awards, and it was all about that style. And I remember distinctly feeling there's a space in that world for me. There's a place for someone to stand up and be like, wait a minute, life's a party. Life is also can be a party like that. Like I wasn't down on any of that music, but I was just like, ooh, there's room for something else. So, a lot of people say, we just did what we did and we didn't have a plan, but I did have the seed of a plan or a notion that there was space there for my style. So, yeah. So in that space, we just grew our own particular little petri dish of happy mold.
Oh, now that you put it that way, let's dive into the actual album and start with the album opener because I love me a solid album opener, and Kitty is an absolute classic.
He needs some petting and loving on his head. He needs some petting and loving on his rain-soaked hide. He's circling around my ankle. He's circling around my ankle. He needs some petting and loving on his hide. Hey, kitty, won't you come inside? Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Kitty, I'm a foot and I want to touch it. Meow, 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 meow.
All right, so I guess my first question is twofold here. How did this become the album's opening track and single? And then on top of that, this is a true story?
First of all, yeah, Kitty is a true story. It was about a cat named Shima, who was Mark Sandman's roommate's cat. Amy had this cat named Chima. So it was a session where it was just a hangout session with me and Mark and a couple other people, and we're sitting around jamming, just making stuff up on the spot. And Shima was famous for kind of like circulating around among the people and kind of purring as she rubbed up against your leg, and then you'd reach down to pet her, and she'd be like, just take your face off. So we're jamming, and there's Chima at my foot. And I just started to sing, kitty at my foot and I want to touch it, kitty at my foot. And so it existed as just that chorus for a long time. I made a little demo, like a weird little 4-track recording with a banjo and some stuff, but it had a verse space, but there was no lyrics in it. So the band helped, playing live with the band. I remembered, I've got this kitty fragment. Let's work on that. So we expanded it into a song. I don't really remember how it ended up being the opening track of the album. It just felt like I was always a fan of the way the Buzzcocks kind of, some of their songs started as if they'd already been going for 5 minutes. You're just like dropped into this like full steam ahead locomotive of punk rock. And maybe that was part of it. Like, let's just have the song start with, just go. Don't bore us, get to the chorus, I guess. But it wasn't a first. I think you were implying that it was the first single, but it wasn't ever considered for a single.
No. I'm so sorry. I meant that it was the album opening track and also a single, because I thought that was a single at one point.
Well, it was later, and we made a video for it, and the video failed miserably. I don't think we even ever officially, at the time, we never released it. It's on YouTube now, so you can marvel at its boring brownness. But, no, Lump was the first single, and Lump was really picked by the record company, not I think as much as by us, because when we first played that song live, it was kind of a dud, because everybody liked, we had Boll Weevil and Back Porch and Dune Buggy and all these Body and all these like bouncy kind of groovy little twangers, and then we played Lump and it's like, downstrokey, like ta 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 ta, just 4 on the floor. And the crowd was kind of like, well, what do we do to this song? Like, I don't know what to do here. So anyway, it was interesting when the label influenced us toward that choice as a first single, and it was a great choice. And that song ended up being like the most fun song to play ever of any song I've ever written. Every time I played that song, it was like I was playing it for the first time. It was phenomenal.
I'm sad alone in a boggy marsh, totally motionless except for her heart. Mud flowed up into Lump's pajamas. She totally confused all the passing piranhas. She's Lump, she's in my head. She's Lump, she might be dead.
Well, while we're talking about Lump, I've always wondered, there are 2 different videos, version A and version B. It appears like the Swamp, which most people remember from the MTV days, I call it the Swamp version of the video. And then version B features some of the elements of the video that people saw on MTV, but interspersed with live footage. Which one came first, and did the label have any push to say, let's try this or let's try that?
Yeah, that was all born out of the fact that, so we had Roman Coppola was our guy. He made our videos for us in the early days. And some of them were very successful, and some of them, like Kitty, were total failures. Peaches and Lump, great. Kitty and Dune Buggy, kind of dark and boring. Although with the Dune Buggy one, it was kind of cool because we played the song live in the video, because we just thought we'd challenge ourselves to do that. So that was fun. But yeah, Roman just shot so much footage. The day we shot everything in one day, all the stuff, or maybe it was 2 days, I'm not sure, but anyway, we ended up with so much footage that I think it was Roman's idea to put together 2 versions, because we just couldn't fit it all into a 2-minute and 11-second song. And so we were all for it. I don't think the B version really, I don't know if the A and B got play on MTV. The Swamp one that starts out in the swamp, that one definitely got the airtime.
That's the one I remember the most.
Yeah, I think the other one was just sort of to satisfy the fact that we had all this footage and maybe confuse people a little bit, so they would be like, hey, wait, have you seen that one? That's not the one, that's the other one. So yeah, but I like that there's 2, and I love things about the one with the live footage. When I put the I had a camera clamped to my instrument, and when I put it up and pointed it at the crowd, that was so serendipitous, right down the neck at the crowd going crazy.
Great shot.
Yeah, it was a really cool, it was my idea. I'm a little bit of a film buff, so, that was my camera operator moment.
There you go. Well, I've only been able to ask this question twice in all of my years podcasting. You're going to be number 3. And the other 2 people I got to ask this question to were Bill Gibson of Huey Lewis and the News and Guy Fletcher of Dire Straits. And that question is, can you talk about the feeling you had when you were approached by Weird Al to parody one of your songs? And how would you describe the Gump experience from the president's side of the story.
Wow, it's a big story. I mean, it's a big story in my life. I don't know if it's a big story objectively, but so Al, as a habit, reaches out to the artist ahead of probably ahead of even starting to finalize his parodies to get permission from the artist. Now, he doesn't have to do that. Technically, when you do a parody, you don't need permission to change the words. You just have to treat it as a parody when you go to pay royalties and all that stuff. But he does do that, and we were thumbs right through the roof, like, yes, please. So he did it, and I'll skip ahead a bit. Years later, I was on a podcast maybe 3 years ago or something with Dave Perner from Soul Asylum, Mike Mills from REM, and me, and we were all talking about our experiences with Al. And so the question came to me, like, where were you when you first saw the video? And I thought, hotel room, backstage. I couldn't picture it. I was like, you know what, guys? I don't know. I have no idea. About a month later, I was talking to Al on the phone, and I said that I couldn't remember. And he's like, you don't remember? And I said, no. And he said, we watched that video together on a tour bus. I think it was the president's tour bus. Just you and me, just Al and me on a bus. And he screened the video for me. And it was the only time in his whole career that he'd ever debuted the video in the room with the artist.
Wow.
And he was super nervous. And what's shocking is, if I don't remember that, what else don't I remember? Geez, did I have pancakes with Dave Grohl on the top of the Space Needle and I just don't know it? So yeah, it was really great. I mean, when I first saw it, and then subsequently on MTV here and there, just, seeing Al playing me. I mean, I remember watching MTV in my friend's basement when it came on. We were like sitting there, it's just static, and then Video Killed the Radio Star comes on, which we ended up making sort of our own later on. But
we're gonna get to that. Don't worry.
Yeah. So to have sort of, on our own, to have gotten into the world of MTV was crazy enough, but then to be parodied by Al was just like mind-boggling, like pinch. Is this a dream? And then Al, we ended up being really good friends, and we've stayed in touch. And every time I go to LA just to kind of chill out, we get together. He and his wife Suzanne and I get together, and my wife Kate, and we just have a good old time.
That's
so
excellent.
Yeah, and we've collaborated with him. He produced a video for us for this song called "Mixed Up Son of a Bitch" from our later album, and we've hijacked each other's sets, live shows, and hopped on stage with each other countless times. And one time in LA was so great, we did a cover of "More Than a Feeling" by Boston. So yeah, it's a delightful experience all around. It's very impressed with he's so technically good at what he does, and he's a great songwriter and a really just amazingly kind and present human. Like, you have a conversation with him and he's just like, you're the only person in the whole world. And it's really nice. Although one time I complimented him on that fact, and he said, actually, it's because my hearing loss from playing is so profound. I have to focus on your face.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, the next song I want to talk about actually has a little bit of a change that happens over the original Pop Llama Records version of the album versus the Columbia Records version, which is Feather Pluckin'.
Billions of birdies squawking out loud, talking in code to clams in the clouds. They send a secret message and send it by worm, so vibrating spiders will receive the word. Well, that's totally feather plucking insane. 10 million monkeys all pick up guitars, but nobody taught them how. 5,000 fishes rocking really, really, really hard. Nobody taught them how. Check out Chicky driving Piggy's little blue car. Nobody taught them how.
Now, if you were one of the lucky few original people to purchase the Pop Llama edition of the album, you got treated to the band's rendition of the Beatles' I've Got a Feeling interspersed into the track. But the version that most people purchased, which was the Columbia re-release, doesn't.
Yeah.
Is there a lawsuit story behind this one?
Well, there's the proactive prevention of a lawsuit is what like two things happened on the Columbia debut. One is that Beatles tribute, which we used to do live all the time. And eventually later live, we would put Baby You're a Rich Man in there too. So we had it was our little spot to pay homage to the Beatles. And then we beeped the fucks in Kitty ourselves on the Pop Llama version. I remember it took forever for us to, at that time in the 90s, we were trying to generate a beep. But when we signed with Columbia, they're like, get rid of the beep, and you can't have that Beatles thing in there because it's too complicated with royalties and it's couched in your song, so it's going to get messy. So we were mastering the record in the basement studio space at Capitol Records in LA, you know, the big round building, the iconic building. And the guy doing the mastering cut some of the lacquers for the American releases of the Beatles albums, Wally Troggett. And we were his last gig doing a mastering job before he retired.
Wow.
So in this space, and he took us into the other room and showed us the lathe that made the masters for the Beatles. And, you know, I touched it. Beep. And so it was incredible. And so, you know, ironically, one of his last moves with the razor blade, and because this is a 1/4-inch master. Yes. We don't have digital files or anything.
No.
So his last move with the razor blade was to cut the Beatles out of our song. It's just so poetic, right? The guy that mastered some of those records ended up cutting that band out of our tune.
Absolutely poetic.
It was just cosmic. He told us a really amazing side story too. Leading up to writing the songs I wrote, and during that time when I was writing the songs I wrote for the debut album for the Presidents, I woke up every morning and put on More Than a Feeling by Boston, because to me it was like this candy-coated, beautiful rock sweet thing, you know, like I just wanted to eat rock candy first thing in the morning to kind of remind myself like what is important with music: harmony, entertainment, you know, like melody. And so the lyrics, of course, woke up this morning and the sun was gone, put on some music to start my day, lost myself in a familiar song. I was doing what the song was saying. So I noticed on Wally's wall a gold record or a platinum record for that record. And he's like, oh yeah, that thing was a bitch, because what happened was they mixed it, got everything ready, Wally mastered it, and then it went out to radio, and the radio compressors crushed the vocal down for some reason too far. And it was bad enough that they recalled 500,000 records and trashed them and remixed and remastered the song so that it would be the right dynamic.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah. So he had a big story to tell about that song, which was the song I used to, like, my compass rose for what music should be.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So yeah, the whole experience was cosmic and trippy, and just, you know, I have a permanent bruise from pinching myself in my career.
Well, I'm going to put my nerd hat on for this next question, if you don't mind.
That's okay. I'm doing it all day.
All right. Along with the feather plucking that we talked about, in Spain, the original vinyl pressing of the album was the band with Bill Clinton on the cover, but that got recalled and replaced with the face paintings that you see on the inside of the Columbia CD version. Right. Was that another instance of Columbia Records going, you guys, I don't know if you could get permission. Was there an issue with the Bill Clinton photo?
No, I think we just had a bunch of different versions of the vinyl. The vinyl wasn't a big deal back then, so it was kind of a sloppy, like, you know, they're doing this in Spain, they're doing this in Italy, they're doing this in France, they're misspelling back porch as black porch. Which is hilarious. So yeah, no, I don't think that wasn't a legal thing. It was just sort of a limited run by a small label in Spain called Munster.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that picture on the front was in color, which was, so our manager, Stacy, set up this situation where we were opening up for Bill Clinton, and then we would meet him and get a photo op afterwards. And the idea was to get that photo op because it would make an amazing promo picture for the band, right? So when it came to take the picture with Clinton, Stacy got in the shot in between Dave and Bill Clinton. And we're like, Stacy, what are you doing? This, we can't, this is before Photoshop was ubiquitous. So we did have it for her photoshopped out. Now the original shot with her in it, we all look amazing. I mean, the light is incredible. We look like we all just came off the beach. We look healthy and wonderful. Whoever did the Photoshop edit did not understand it. Like, it just fucked with the colors. We all look like we had the flu. Dave's hair is kind of greenish, Everybody's got red noses. And it was just like, so later when we used it as a poster, we made it black and white. And then you couldn't tell how terrible the photo had been butchered by the Photoshop person. But so, yeah, that forever after that, we're like, Stacy, what the hell were you thinking?
Well, in 1996, on President's Day, which is very fitting, MTV aired a concert from your performance in front of Mount Rushmore. I was sitting in my dorm room in college. I recorded it on VHS tape and wore that tape out. Wow. Given that MTV was still in its prime at that moment as a music influencer, did that airing propel the album's popularity more than it already had been growing at the time?
Boy, I don't know. At the time, anytime you were on TV, there was a bump. Like when you did the Tonight Show, bump. When you did the Letterman, bump. So I assume there was a, as similar kind of sales surge after that special. I mean, that was unique, unlike, say, on a late night show where you play one song, you've got 3 minutes of airtime. That was 30 minutes, I think, or something close to it of airtime with all Kennedy yammering and doing her thing. I think it was a total of 30 minutes. So I assume it was just another bump. That was quite an amazing thing because we were stuck. We said yes to that, and the record label totally engineered that whole thing, which was great. And we were on our way to do it. And we got to San Francisco and the airport shut down because of fog. And we're literally like on in, an hour and a half. We got to get to North Dakota and from San Francisco. And so we rented a jet, like a tiny plane that apparently could navigate the fog. And, being aware of the whole Buddy Holly thing. Like, got to get to the next gig. You just got to get in this little plane and then everything will. And I was freaked out. I got to say, man, I was like, we're going to die. This is how stories go. This is how you end up smashed into the side of a mountain. But we made it and everything worked out fine. And, we got to get in our own little tiny jet. That was our one time where we were like, custom jet people. And that gig was memorable too, because it was cold out and there were hot air vents in the stage blowing up at us, but only in the spots where our microphone stands were. So if we went away from the mic to kind of rock out with Jason or whatever, our guitars would go out of tune. We actually re-performed 4 songs because of tuning issues.
Really?
So, yeah, it was kind of a long day.
I mean, at least for the audience, it was like bonus concert time, so I couldn't be that bad.
Oh, no, it was great. We had a great time, and actually we were, I'm sure we were happy to play the songs again because we were just so into the scene and it was fantastic. So, yeah, but it was just one of those side notes. Like, we've done a few shows over the years where we're playing in like freezing temperatures and it wreaks havoc on your tuning. It's real tough.
Well, still staying on that special, I'm going to pivot into cover songs because on that special, you opened with a cover song, which also made the self-titled album, your cover of MC5's Kick Out the Jams.
Well, I've been elected to rock your asses till midnight. Well, this is my turn and I shaved up my perm, but it's alright. I solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution. Got a rock and roll problem, well, we got the solution. So let me be who I am and let me kick out the jam. Yeah, let me kick out the jam. I done kicked him out.
And then later in the special, you guys performed the band's cover of Video Killed the Radio Star.
They took the credit for your killed the radio star. Video killed the radio star. In my mind and in my car, we can't rewind, we've gone too far.
Thinking about cover songs for this band, was there a thought process that went into, hey, let's do MC5 here, let's do the Buggles here? The covers definitely pay homage to the original, but they're uniquely President's songs.
Yeah, that's the 2-string thing, 2 and 3-string thing, and tiny drum set at work. You know, like it sounds like us because that's our sound, but you know, we're paying homage to our influences. I mean, the Kick Out the Jams thing, I kind of discovered this in like 91. I discovered the MC5 and the Stooges at the same time. And they just, you know, we used to cover TVI by the Stooges at the drop of a hat. It was one of those things we just had in our back pocket. If things were going really well and the room is crackling, one of us would launch into TVI and just like, here we go, and unplanned. So Kick Out the Jams was a similar sensation. It just felt so fun to play. There's a little story with that. We changed the words. We Weird Alified that song, actually. We changed all the verse lyrics, kept the chorus lyrics. So it wasn't technically a parody because we kept the tagline was the same, title was the same, all that. When we sent it off to the MC5 camp to get approved as a, you know, it's a cover, but it's changed so that we had to get their approval, they said no.
Really?
We don't want to do it. Yeah. Patti Smith was in charge of Fred Sonic Smith's legacy, the guitar player who'd passed away. And Wayne Kramer, they both said, you can't change it. Wayne, you know, I don't know exactly what their logic was, but they just said no. So our lawyer was partners with Patti Smith's lawyer, David Cotico and Rosemary Carroll. So David worked on Rosemary, who worked on Patti, I guess. And then Wayne fell in line, and eventually they said yes. Like a year later, maybe a couple years later, I kind of was realizing, hey, we never sent anyone from the MC5 like a platinum award, you know, with the platinum record. So I called the major label and said, hey, send Wayne Kramer a platinum album. They did. And then about a month later, Wayne called me at home. I don't know how he got my number, but I pick up the phone. It's Wayne Kramer. And he's like, I am so grateful for this award. Thank you so much. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me. And I'm so touched and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, let me tell you why I said no. He said, I said no because I felt like if I allowed the words to be changed to our signature song, it would be like tampering with history. It would be disrespectful to the legacy of the band and all this stuff. And then through time, I guess, and through some convincing from Rosemary Carroll and Patti Smith, he said yes. And he felt like when he said yes, his whole relationship to their catalog and their legacy changed. He felt way less attached to it and like sort of bound by it. And he loosened up and was like, you know what? If I say no to the Presidents, it's like I'm the man and I'm crushing creative progress, right? So he had this epiphany and we really bonded over that and became friends and everything. And then smash cut to like 2015, I think it was. MC5 comes to Seattle. Most of the original members, you know, except the ones that have died.
Mm-hmm.
And I did Kick Out the Jams with them live. Amazing. I'm in the MC5 for a song, you know. And then we're backstage afterwards, like laughing and high-fiving and drinking beers and stuff. And I tell the whole story about how Wayne said no, and then he said yes, and it changed his attitude. And then there's a beat of silence, and then Wayne pipes up and he says, actually, I needed a new garage, and I heard you guys were going to be huge. And so the whole room like loses it, like, ah! And so apparently that's all it was he needed some cash.
Well, thank God for that then.
I know.
The other one I mentioned was Video Killed the Radio Star. You talked earlier in our conversation about sitting and watching MTV for the first time and seeing that. I'm guessing that had part to do with it, but I'm wondering how it became a part of the Wedding Singer soundtrack, why they didn't go with the Buggles and why they chose your version.
I think Adam Sandler's a fan.
Awesome.
You know, during that time when that was happening, he would call my house and I never talked to him, but he left a couple messages that were hilarious. He was talking about how I had a newborn son at the time and he was giving me instructions on how to go water skiing with a newborn. I don't know why. But anyway, I didn't save those messages, unfortunately, but I got the sense that he was just into he was a fan, and I'm not sure exactly how that whole thing came about, but yeah, that song, when it even, when it came on the radio, when I'd be driving around in Seattle in the early 80s, I would have to pull over the car because it was so, again, like More Than a Feeling, Video Killed the Radio Star. These are like just song sugar, they're so satisfying. They just like quench your thirst for harmony and melody and everything, and atmosphere. So yeah, it was fun. And it was, the reason we covered it is like, well, that's a great song, but maybe it would be even greater, or a different kind of great, if it were hard charging and not as many like frilly lines, but just kind of, let's just nail it to the floor and see what happens. And in that way, we kind of felt like we made it our own.
Certainly did.
And then, yeah, we made a video for this. It was a single from the soundtrack album for that movie. So we made a video, and we had already broken up when we shot the video. So in the video, I hold up a sign that says "I quit," and it's kind of poetic. It's like video killed the radio star. We're disintegrating as a band and getting killed, metaphorically, I guess. So it all kind of dovetailed together quite nicely.
Well, we already talked about Lump, so I think it's only fitting that we throw in some conversation about Peaches as well.
Right.
Millions of peaches, peaches for me. Millions of peaches, peaches for free. Millions of peaches, peaches for me. Millions of peaches, peaches for free. Look out!
Now, from what I've read over the years, and if I'm wrong, please correct me here, this song stems from everything from LSD to John Prine.
Well, both, actually. And Mary Lou, the girl that introduced me to Beck, she's involved.
Okay.
So where does it begin? It begins with me taking acid. And then walking. I was living with Mark Sandman, and then I went out of the house and I walked to where Mary Lou's house was, in this same kind of neighborhood, because I had developed feelings for Mary Lou, and I was going to tell her that I had a crush on her, and see what would happen. And of course, taking LSD is the first step in any young romantic's quest for connection. You want to start with drugs.
Kids, don't try this at home.
So I get to her house, and she's not home, and her house was this like canary yellow Victorian house in this very different kind of neighborhood, like, machine shops and garages. And then here's this like Tweety bird house, even not on LSD. It was remarkable. And a peach tree in the yard by the white picket fence. So I go in, I knock on the door. She's not home. So I go sit under her peach tree, and I'm just like, squishing peaches and literally doing what the song says. She never did come home. So, it sort of I never made that connection. We were in a band later called Strumpet and hung out and stuff like that, but and we're still good friends. In fact, I just had a big phone catch up with her about a couple weeks ago, which was great. And then I showed it to the band, and Dave Dieterer came up with that whole end part. Millions of peaches, peaches for me. That was all Dave. So it's like, it's very much me and then Dave. And I love that about the song. I love that it's like a real collaboration with Dave, which a lot of the songs we did were just kind of like, I wrote the whole song, they interpret it, but this was like a co-write, which was really cool. So yeah, that's kind of the origin story of Peaches.
Well, we've talked about the hits from the album, the covers, some classic cuts, but I would wonder, as one of the members of the band, what, in your opinion, are some of the most underrated songs on the self-titled album? Maybe songs that you wished would have been a single.
I think Boll Weevil.
Boll Weevil, get right out of your home. Goodbye, I gotta stay on move some other day. Bye-bye, gotta go to sleep and let the tube shine. Let the tube shine. Let the tube shine. Let the tube shine. Now I will tell you about Boll Weevil. Well, that bug is just too scary. He's sitting there all alone. I try to coax him out. Put him out, drop the pies, but he will not move a muscle. And I tried to make him see that the sun is shining outside. To make him see that the sun is shining outside. To make him see that the sun is shining outside. To make him see that the sun is shining outside. To make him see that the sun is shining outside.
That song just slayed live, super fun to play. Another one where I really, every time we played it, I was excited to play it, actually. I think we should have made a video for that instead of Dune Buggy and Kitty. We should have made like a throwbacks, 70s disco themed extravaganza video. That would have been a smart move. Really fun and bright and explosive. So yeah, that's my pick. Bo
All
Weevil.
right. Well, earlier we talked about your stint with Beck, but I'm a huge 90s hip hop fan, so I can't talk to you and not bring up Subset, which was your collaboration with Sir Mix-a-Lot.
Right.
You guys had songs like Addicted to Fame, which is on YouTube, Beach Rats, and We Can't Stop Us. Considering where nu metal was at the time of Subset, why was there never an album for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, about 2 years ago, we all got together and revisited that question and thought we would put it out, believe it or not, as an NFT. There was a moment where we were taking meetings with NFT people, but everyone we met with felt like they were also in charge of the Fire Festival, kind of.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Like, we'd get on a Zoom call with them and they'd be somewhere like, oh, where are you? Oh, we're in Barcelona. And then the next time, where are you? Oh, we're in, Pongo or whatever. They were always somewhere exotic with their shirt unbuttoned on most of the way and kind of just gave us the creeps. So we backed off that idea. But, every 5 or 6 years I run into Mix and he's like, we got to put out the record. And I'm like, go ahead and do it. If he would take charge of it, that'd be great. So that project was really fun. Mix was contacted by some record label that wanted to do a compilation album of songs by Pacific Northwest artists covered by unlikely pairings of Pacific Northwest artists. So it'd be like Queensryche and Heart or Sir Mix-a-Lot and the Presidents, and it would be us doing a Hendrix tune. But we got together to talk about that and had dinner out at a restaurant, and immediately we got along so well and we had so many interesting ideas just among ourselves that we're like, forget the cover, let's just make some new music. And we made Beach Rats and Addicted to the Fame, and just was like, well, that was great, let's do more and more and more. So we just kept going and going, and we do have a record pretty much done, but we just can't agree on how to put it out. I think we should just put it out for free, put it up on a streamer or all the streamers, and no money involved. Some of it doesn't age exactly right. Some of the lyrics the Mix was spouting were kind of would not be, I don't know. It's a different time. It's like there's red flags in there that we kind of are like, I don't think we want to charge money for this. But Mix, I think he wants to do it in a way that would generate some cash. So we had so many expectations for that collaboration, and then we had kind of a weird, disastrous show here at the Showbox where Dave's amp broke, and we didn't quite have the confidence as a unit to kind of fill a gap where we have technical difficulties, and we kind of floundered, and people kind of were like, I don't know. But we did a West Coast tour that was amazing. Like, all the other shows we did were just like off the hook, crazy, funny. Mix being, letting him be the front man was really fun for me, just backing up and doing bass, and I played keyboards and saying some of the stuff. But anyway, it was a fun experience, and it was really great to get to know Mix. He turned me on to recording in Pro Tools and digital formats, and I would not be as kind of in touch with my true creative self if it weren't for me hanging out with him for all those years, watching him work and learning how to do all that stuff. So yeah, he's a big deal as a friend and as a collaborator. He's a great guy too. Really nice dude.
I'm just going to throw out there has never been a 25th anniversary edition of an album that's never been released. You guys could be the first.
That's great. I love it. That's a really good idea. That might be a good pitch for those guys to kind of rekindle that project.
Hey, if that happens, if you could just throw a shout out to Brian Colburn at My Weekly Mixtape in the liner notes, that'll be awesome. Yep. Maybe I'll get to come out to a show. I'll introduce you on stage. Maybe I'll jam out with you too. What the hell? Why not? I'll have some fun.
Yeah. You'd be the fifth Beatle or whatever.
There you go. I'll be the Yoko Ono.
Yeah. The subset.
Yes. Well, we've been talking about the self-titled album throughout this discussion, but the Presidents, to me, are a lot more than just the self-titled album. Just off the top of my head, you've got Mach 5 from 2. You've got Slow Fly from Kudos to You. You had mentioned Mixed Up Son of a Bitch from These Are All Good Times People. What are some of your personal favorite songs from across the President's discography that are not on the self-titled release?
Wow, that's a good one. Some Postman. I really loved playing that song live. That was super fun. And that came about so beautifully. A friend of mine, Ramona in New York, sent me a CD of some songs I think she was working on, and it never arrived. And she called me like, "Did you get the CD?" And I said, "No, I didn't, never got it." And she's like, "Oh, darn it." And I said, "Well, Some Postman is grooving to it," and went, "Whoa, song title." And she's a songwriter too. So I was like, "Ramona, call me back in 20 minutes and let's both write songs called Some Postman and we'll put out a single." So I hang up the phone. I wrote it, recorded a demo of it. She calls back. I'm like, "Here, listen to it." And she listens to it. And then I'm like, "All right, play yours." And she's like, I couldn't do it. I didn't write one. And she still hasn't written one. And I'm still giving her a hard time. She came in like, I don't know, 2014 or something. She came to a show in New York. And from the stage, I pointed her out to everybody like, "There's Ramona." And she still owes me that song. So anyway, that song, for some reason, that pops right off the top of my head. Yeah, the song "Mixed Up Son of a Bitch" that Al recorded, that was really fun to hear that one come to fruition. I started that song way back in like 1989.
Wow.
You know, I had a 4-track, and at the time 4-tracks were kind of expensive and not all songwriters had access to it. So I made a little poster like, are you a singer-songwriter that wants to do a demo? I tried to, start a tiny little studio with like one mic and my 4-track. I only ever got one phone call from the ad, and it was this woman who was just completely deluded and had delusions of grandeur and wasn't making any sense. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't think I really want to do this as a job. And you are a mixed up son of a bitch. And I wrote this song about her, the only respondent to my ad to go to my apartment and record songs. So I don't know, those two kind of pop out. Crown Victoria. That one was really like, yeah, that had John Roderick from the Long Winters on backup vocals. And that was fun to, believe it or not. We played that live several times, and it was really fun to just kind of get into that slow groove of that song. Yeah, so those three kind of pop out for some weird reason.
Well, the band's last two releases both came out in 2014. That's Kudos to You and the live album Thanks for the Feedback. But then sadly in 2015, the Presidents ended their run.
Correct.
With the 30th anniversary of the self-titled album being this year, is there any chance of that maybe being a catalyst for a reunion of sorts, or maybe some deluxe edition of the album, maybe bringing the Presidents back in 2025?
Yeah, we're doing some stuff around the anniversary. We took over Lithium XM Radio like a month ago and DJ'd, and we found the guy Craig, who used to do our live sound. Multitrack recorded our last show in January of '98, the last show of the first chapter.
Yeah.
And it sounded great. And we had our friend Johnny Sangster mix it. And so we have this fully mixed live show that is amazing. And we're not sure what we're going to do with it yet, but during this year, where it's the 30th anniversary, we're either going to release it in like song chunks as lyric videos, maybe online, or just do the whole thing, or do just the debut album tracks as a little mini concert, put them in order and all that.
Nice.
But it came out great. So we have that intellectual property that we're just kind of sitting on right at the moment. We're overdue for a meeting to figure out what we're doing with that. And then now playing live, no, we're not going to do that, because I look back and I listen to that show and I look back at videos and stuff, even of how we performed in the 2010 to 15 range. But if you look back into the 90s, so much jumping, so much energy, so much like focus, and I just can't do it. I'm 60 years old and my feet are kind of hurting me, and my elbows, I've got like some sort of weird arthritis in my elbows. I can only play guitar for like 5 minutes before my elbows start to explode. So yeah, I'm just, I watched an interview with REM recently too, and they're the same way. They're like, the way I see it is like, it's an arc, and it was a beautiful arc, but it has arced. And as a creative person, letting that arc finish and be done, and then starting new ones. You have room to start new ones. And, I've done Casper Baby Pants for, 0 to 5 year olds and their parents,
Yes.
kids. And then I'm doing this solo record arc now. I'm finishing up album number 9 on that. So part of evolving as a creative person is making space for new stuff to come in. And part of that is not saying yes to reuniting the band. The nice thing is the three of it, like REM, we're all on the same page. All three of us are like, although Dave quit the band in 2004, and we went on for another 11 years. And so I think Dave's got a little itch. Like, I think if Jason and I had it in us, he might be the first to say yes. But Jason and I are just too, we played a lot more shows than Dave. And I played, on top of all those Presidents shows, I played 1,300 Casper Baby Pants shows in 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just wore out my parts.
Well, it's perfect timing, because I was going to bring up Casper Baby Pants, your children's music project, as well as the music you've released as a solo artist, which you've described as, I quote, fuzzy, psychedelic, groovy, nappy, suited, distorted jam albums.
There you go. I like it. Although I've sort of consolidated down to a genre that I call pop cosmic.
There you go.
Because it's pop music, but then it's got cosmic elements to it. So it's pop cosmic.
So there's something about these albums that I find very refreshing, very exciting. And also, once again, I'm going to use the term the alternative to the alternative, because all of these albums are available on every streaming site. However, on your webpage, chrisballew.org, all of the albums are available to download for free.
Totally.
To me, that is a unique approach to promoting and marketing an album, and I'd love to hear the mindset behind that approach.
Well, it's an experiment that I've always, sometimes out of necessity, like in the early days out of necessity, I didn't have any infrastructure. Like when I was making 4-track cassettes and playing in the subway and selling my tapes and busking and all that, that felt like a perfect circle of like, write a song, record the song, sell the song, perform the song, like it's, and the scale was all that was kind of, could be perceived as, a bummer. I didn't see it as a bummer. I saw it as like a full circle that was, attainable and reachable, a goal that's reachable. So I guess that kind of trickled into this idea where when the Presidents got signed, I remember sitting down with the label and saying, we'd like to promote this record without really appearing to promote it at all. Because I always kind of feel like I want honest, like any sort of success that my songs achieve, I want them to achieve it without a promotional machine pushing them, because then I will trust the level of acclaim they achieve, right? Like with Casper, I didn't do any promotion at all, except write the songs, record the songs, play shows, sell the CDs, and let families ingest it, and then let the families tell other families about it. So that's just kind of stuck as my sort of preferred way to gauge the music's honest place in the landscape, right? Like, so if I have my latest solo record has something, the songs all have something like 4,000 listens. And to me, that's like amazing. Like 4,000 people have listened to this song. It's just incredibly fulfilling and exciting. And it's not about money. I'm fortunately in a position where the Presidents and Casper kind of pay the bills. And now I can just be a hobbyist who makes music because I want to hear it, and then I put it out with no expectations, and then any listener count is a victory if you I guess it's like that, what is it, under promise and over deliver kind of attitude, like. So I just feel really comfortable with that, and I don't think I'm not in a position where I need to charge money for it, so I'm not gonna tax the listener just because that's the normal thing to do. I just think making it free takes economics out of my creative process too. I don't think about that. I think more about the person listening to the album. I'm forever trying to remake Sgt. Pepper's. I'm trying to make that like headphone journey through all sorts of styles and textures and stuff that I experienced as a kid when I listened to that record. So I don't want money to get in the way of people having a good time with the music.
Well, I have had a good time with the last 8 solo albums. I'm looking forward to 9 and beyond.
Great.
The President of the United States of America turns 30 this year, and you can hear it anywhere and everywhere you listen to music. Chris's solo music can be found at chrisballew.org, as well as all the streaming sites. Chris, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on My Weekly Mixtape.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. And it's great to talk and tell all these stories. Yeah. Sometimes I tell all these stories. I'm like, really? Did that really all happen to me? So it's fun to revisit them. So thanks for having me.
And to those listening, there is a full Presidents of the United States of America playlist embedded on the episode page over at myweeklymixtape.com. And remember, you can find My Weekly Mixtape on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can also head to myweeklymixtape.com to check out the full catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes. And finally, if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. There you can find ad-free episodes of the show, gain early access to upcoming episodes, chime in on future topics, become a guest curator, and so much more. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes.